Hello and welcome to another episode of Tory Talks. I'm Sam. This is...
Morning, I'm Ian.
And today's date is the 18th of July already. And this edition of Tory Talks is going to be a local one because we haven't done a local one for a while and a lot of stuff has been happening. And we've had our first online executive meeting, haven't we? During Corona. So.
Yeah, well, it was actually, so we've had that was the second, the one you saw on Tuesday was actually the second online executive meeting we've had. But before anybody who's not necessarily interested in Ipswich turns away or turns off, a lot of the stuff we're talking about is probably quite relevant to all councils around the country. So it's very council related, very local authority related, rather than, and of course, most of it's going to be about the local authority that we know the most about, where we live. But a lot of it is relevant to national politics and the way the different parties are seeing things, and opposition parties see things to what a party in government does.
Second one. I didn't realise because I didn't watch the first one. So I normally go to the executive meetings and record if I can, because the council, we've asked, haven't we, for them to be recorded and live streamed in the past, and we've been told no, so we've kind of done it off our own back in the past. So this was the first one that I watched, and I must admit I saw a massive change. So can we just talk quickly about the executive meeting and then we can go on to the subject?
Certainly, Sam, you and I both know, because I'm on the executive. Let me just say this, that I'm an opposition councillor, so I'm the opposition group leader, but it's common practice in Ipswich. The Conservatives were first to do it when we were last in power, that we offer a seat on the executive, which is the decision-making body of the council, to the opposition group leader. Allows for more discussion and is a bit more open. I turned it down for the first year that I was leader. But then have changed my mind. And as you know, they used to be over. There could be 15 things on the agenda, really important things to discuss, and they used to be over in 10 or 15 minutes. Literally, the report would be announced. He'd go around the table, the leader would go around the table asking if anybody had got any comments. None of them would have any comments, and they'd just say, "Let's vote on it then," and they'd all stick their hands up and say, "We vote in favour."
Well, yeah, and I sort of, the first time I went there, I saw that for myself, because I thought, maybe Ian's just being a bit cynical here, but you were like, this is literally a rubber stamping exercise. And I went there and there was nothing. And then I noticed the first time I brought my camera out to film it, all of a sudden some of them were like, peacocking a little bit because they knew that they were going to be on camera. But not as bad as this one. There was a lot to be said in this executive because it's being live streamed.
Yeah, well. Couple of things there. Let's remember these meetings are open to the public, so just so people know, the public could attend these meetings, but like a lot of things, they're at a funny time of the day, and it's much more accessible if they're online. So although they're open to the public, when you're there and there's only, let's say, one member of the public there and a couple of members of press, you know what audience you're playing to. When they're being streamed, although the information is there to whoever's doing the streaming as to how many people are watching, the people in the committee themselves have got no idea. There could be one man and his dog watching, or there could be the whole population of Ipswich. And so they have deliberately changed their tactic, and it's quite sad. In a way it's brilliant, because they are now what they're supposed to be, but it's quite sad that they're nearly all falling over themselves to actually say something, whereas before they would literally sit there and say nothing. They're almost, it's my turn. It's my turn to say how brilliant we are and to say I agree with everything. And it's almost like parrot fashion. One of them says something, and if it's on a paper that isn't particularly weighty and hasn't got much substance to it, you'll find that one person says something, and then another Labour councillor says exactly the same, and then another one says the similar version to on the same theme. And by that, I'm sitting there thinking, I know I was moaning because they were over too quickly, but this is just ridiculous. This is just 7 people say exactly the same thing, one after the other. Also, they can have their 5 minutes of fame. But if that's what I have to go through to get them to actually take these seriously, then I'll sit through. It was an hour and 45 minutes, the executive on Tuesday, which this isn't an exaggeration, but if you added up probably nearly all of the executives for the whole of the last council year, they probably don't come to that amount of time. Which is really, really sad. Now, I do think that this one, because you'll hear my opinion later on this budget that's come out, but these are the toughest financial times that this council has ever undergone at the moment. So I think it would have been a bigger debate anyway, but certainly it wouldn't have been anywhere near the length that this would. And I've already spoken to the chief exec during my weekly phone call with him, and certainly he's noticed a difference. Sorry if I shouldn't be repeating any of this, chief exec. And I've already opened dialogue with him about the fact that I think that these should continue, and we should find ways to make these continue, because they are opening them up, and they are. It is a way. Well, we're in the 21st century. They can be live streamed. I think they tried to put costs down. If you remember, they tried to argue against me by saying it costs too much, but they've now realised it costs nothing, or they realise they can't argue that anymore. So they are looking for live streaming works well when it's on Zoom or Teams. If you imagine the normal setting, when we're in a large council chamber, it's a little bit more difficult to have a live streaming then, because you've either got to have a series of cameras all looking at different people, or you're just going to get one fixed view, and that might be of the back of people's heads or the front of people's heads or whatever. So there are questions to answer as to how you live stream it normally, differently from this, but certainly it's opened the dialogue, which I'm well chuffed about.
Yeah, absolutely, because we've wanted this for quite a while, haven't we? So yeah, I just I must admit, I did say to the kids, I said, "Oh, I'm just going to watch the executive," and so they looked at it, they went, "Oh, that's Ian, hi," on telly, and then they just went and played, and I said, "I'll only be 20 minutes, it'll be fine," because I'm used to going to these meetings, and then as it was like over an hour, I was like, "Oh, I better go and put those kids to bed."
So for the last 20, as you know, I always take a coffee to any meeting, whether it's live or I've got one of these, even though I'm in my own house. I don't know why I've got that. I think it's because it's a bigger cup than usual. But so I was expecting to be longer than usual. I was expecting to be no more than 30, 40 minutes. And this is for the last 20 minutes. You're lucky you can only see the top half, because for the last 20 minutes, I wish I was sitting on a commode, because I was absolutely bursting for the toilet. But the problem is that you have to stay for the whole debate, else you're not allowed to vote on something. And I wanted to make it. I obviously wanted to put it on record that I was voting against these budget proposals, and this budget was taken up a really long bit of time. And I was sitting here, because obviously you can only see my top half. I was sitting here, which is exactly what I'm doing now, proper crossing my legs from one side to other. And I actually even sadly contemplated, I've got an empty cup there, I could use it. And nobody would notice. And as some of the Labour councillors were gabbling on, I did actually consider, could I get away with that? Could I get away with that? And for about 5 seconds, the thought was in my mind as to whether I could get away with going to the toilet, live streaming a council meeting. I didn't, obviously. I didn't, but I bet around the country, bearing in mind lots of councillors are of an advanced age, my bet across the country is that there's either a councillor that does Zoom meetings sitting on a commode type thing, or somebody has done what I've just said. No shadow of a doubt, definitely happened. That's council business for you.
Yeah, so we've got the hard pressing stuff right now that we're talking about. But so let's talk about the actual subjects that were involved. And you've mentioned the meaty one, which was the emergency budget.
Okay, so each council has to set a budget each year, and the law dictates that it also sets a financial plan for the next 4 years. And they do that once a year. Most councils do it in February. That comes out in about February, March time for the municipal year, which starts in April, May time. And then it's set, and that's something for them to work towards and go towards. Now, obviously, each council's finances has been thoroughly caned by the coronavirus. Councils raise their own money through a series of fees and charges and incomes, but they also have to spend a lot more. Now, we know that there's going to be cuts needed, we know that there's pressure on the finance, and there's almost definitely need to be cuts needed to pay for that. But Ipswich Borough Council, the Labour-controlled Ipswich Borough Council, kind of like brought out a document which is trying to lead the public to believe there's this £10.2 million black hole in our finances. Now, put it into context, we only have a net budget each year of about £22 million. The council tax income in Ipswich is about £13.5–14 million. So it's pretty much half of our net budget amount that they say we've got to find. Now, my argument is that it's a completely made up document. It's a worst case scenario. My argument was, and their tactic has tried to be, oh look, Councillor Fisher doesn't understand what he's talking about. To which I pointed out that, well, I'm trained in accounts, so I do know what I'm talking about. But a lot of their tactic has been, let's paint this worst picture, and then let's attack the government for what the government's doing to help us through this. But what they've presented, which is sensible in a business way, is a worst case scenario document. But they're asking councillors to vote on certain things within this document based on a set of assumptions. And some of these assumptions, I mean, already some of these assumptions are wrong because we've already had extra information from the government that we didn't have when these papers were come out. And by the time it goes to the full council on the 29th of this month, there'll be more information. So my argument was, why are we making decisions, or you're asking councillors to make decisions based on false information? We don't need to have this budget. We could just enact the cuts as and when we know what the financial impact is. So I suppose in a way, what I've been trying to do is highlight some of the inaccuracies in this document, because what I'd really like to have done is presented maybe two documents to council. This is what it could be if everything goes horrendously bad. This is where we think we'll be if we, but this is the best case scenario if we get everything that the government has said they're going to do. And we need to obviously work around these three documents, but they haven't. They've done their usual, and it's been obvious that their tactic is going to be, let's criticise the government for the level of funding that they've given throughout this crisis.
Well, yeah, I mean, you weren't a shrinking violet, let's be honest, during the executive, and you didn't mince your words either. So you did use disingenuous, you hit them quite hard with this, and so anything that you're saying here isn't something that you wouldn't have said at the executive, and you did say. And I did think, and I saw them visibly annoyed by your interpretation of this. But I think it's refreshing, and this is why it's so important to have someone on the opposition beyond the executive, because you are calling them out for what this is. This feels to me, as for someone from the outside, I'm obviously not a councillor, I'm just a voter and obviously an activist. It felt like a piece of propaganda. We wouldn't be having it written the way it is if this was a Conservative council with a Conservative government, or if the government right now was Labour. And I just don't feel like there's a place for this kind of this propaganda to be put in. I would have expected, and I'm not an accountant, is kind of like a green, amber, red sort of situation in there. So the three, like you say, the three scenarios of if we're going to come out with this budget, which I don't believe we should have done. These are the scenarios that we need to look into. Once we reach amber or red, then we need to enact something. Do you know what I mean? Like, and so
I know exactly what you mean. I mean, I suppose you've hit the nail on the head very succinctly. I mean, every council paper that comes out, you can accuse of being a piece of propaganda, because obviously there's a political edge to everything. But the one thing I've really tried to do, and our group have tried to do throughout this whole pandemic, is be very supportive of every decision that the council's made. It's really important that you work together here, that you don't pick holes in things, and that the voters see that you're joined together, you're all working together for the same aim. And I think Keir Starmer's shown this. You look on central government, look at the way Keir Starmer has tried to work with the government a little bit and not necessarily attack them for some of the things he could attack them, because at times of crisis, same as at times of war, you've really got to show a united front here. So I was disappointed that they felt the need to bring out a document like this without no further explanation. Now, I suppose the one thing that I'm quite conscious of is that a lot of people reading this perhaps don't have the forensic accounting abilities to be able to pick holes in some of these figures that maybe an experienced counsellor or somebody with accounts knowledge would be able to. So a lot of people, so I think it should have been further explained that this number is an estimate. This number is based on this. And there hasn't been that. So to all intents and purposes, you've actually scared the bejesus out of the population of Ipswich, thinking that they're not going to have a council anymore, or their council tax is going to double because you haven't got any money. And there's no need for that, which I think is really highlighted in the fact that the main points of this document are the council are saying we've got a £10.2 million black hole in our finances, and they're asking people to vote on a set of cost-cutting measures. The cost-cutting measures amount to £240,000 this year. It's £240,000. So that's 2.3% of the money they think they've got to save. Well, I think that highlights to everybody, if they really were expecting a £10.2 million black hole in their finances, they'd be talking about a lot more cost savings than £240,000 worth. So, yeah, it was a shame that the document came out, but it does promote, you said earlier, and this is interesting for anybody who doesn't know how an executive meeting works. Before I was on the executive, I could submit questions to the executive and they would be read out during the report and an answer would be given. Those answers are written by officers. They're given to the councillors and the councillors have the choice to either read the answer that the officer has given them or put a spin on it themselves. So as you'll notice, the Liberal Democrat group, because they don't have a representative on the executive, asked 4 or 5 questions. The problem with that is that they ask a question and then the last say always goes to the Labour councillor. So the Labour councillor could come out with an answer, and a couple of times they actually did. And I bet the Liberal Democrat councillor really wanted to come back with something, really wanted to, oh, hang on, that's not entirely true what you said there, but they have no comeback. So the Labour councillor can just have a kind of like a gotcha moment. So you're wrong, you've done this, you've said this is happening, and then there's no comeback. Whereas in the executive with me, because I'm just as entitled to speak as anybody else, and until I've said I've got nothing left to say, they have to let me speak, which they hate. They can't just wrap up, let's say, an agenda item. If I said I've still got something to say, they have to listen. And I did obviously say right at the beginning, I'm not going to dispute things just for the sake of disputing them. But it gives me the chance to come back to them with, well, because there was a couple of times when they used what I called falsehoods, disingenuous figures, or blatantly, I think I did use the word lie with their portfolio holder for finance, because he has told the same lie at 2 separate committees now about these papers. That lie being that the government has only promised to give another £500 million to councils. Well, that's complete baloney, rubbish, made up nonsense. And you get the ability to do that. So that's what I was looking to do with this document.
Yeah. And let's talk about the cuts or the changes that they're proposing, one of which is something that I think they've misread the public on personally, and on a personal level I would be sad if there wasn't an opportunity to fight this, and this would be closing the Tourist Information Centre in Ipswich.
Yeah, okay, well look, to put it into context, funnily enough, most towns or cities, believe it or not, do not have a dedicated tourist information centre. They have a tourist information centre or an area inside another building where you can go and get tourist information, and that's potentially what we're proposing here. But I'm in total agreement. The cost saving and the closure of the Tourist Information Centre at a time when we're looking to attract more people into Ipswich. Ipswich has got a very good cultural and leisure offering, hasn't necessarily got a good retail offering, so we need to attract more people into Ipswich. And to put this into context for people, the Tourist Information Centre in Ipswich, a little bit different from normal. Ipswich has a lot of very, very historic churches in and around the town centre. The Tourist Information Building is in one of these historic, hundreds of years old churches. That's kind of like a beacon in the middle of a very built-up area, so it's right next to a very modern shopping centre, and it just sits there. And the open space around this is called Arras Square. Arras is the town in France that we're twinned with. And last year it was announced that £1.5 million was going to be spent on this area to improve it. Maybe have some seating areas for all the restaurants that are next door in the butter market, but basically make it a nicer place to go and to be, and a central place where people can congregate. Excuse me. Now, the brilliant Conservative government announced something called the Towns Fund before this pandemic, where they were giving money, allocated money to groups of towns that suffer from deprivation or need a bit of a boost, and Ipswich got allocated £1 million. So we're going to use that $1 million, but it has to be on projects which are pretty ready. They're capital projects, and this project is pretty ready because we were planning it already. So we're using it. The government has given us £1 million, and we're going to use £500,000 of our own money to really improve this area. So we're going to improve the area, make it a beacon place to go in Ipswich, and then while we're improving the area, we're going to close our one and only asset we have in the area, the Tourist Information Centre. So all these new people that we're going to get to come into this area of Ipswich are going to see another closed building. Well, it's ridiculous. The Labour leader of the council has already admitted that the Tourist Information Centre would have had to have been closed anyway while this work was continuing, because it's building work going on and around it, so they wouldn't have been able to be open. So I even failed to see what money they say they're going to save, because it was going to be closed anyway. But yeah, to put it into context, the Cornhill, the big square in Ipswich, was also redesigned and redone a couple of years ago. But if you remember, when it opened, unfortunately, due to timing, two of the major places that are actually border this square both closed and were both empty. So this massive £3.7 million improvement took place, and then when it was unveiled, there was nothing surrounding it. No nice restaurants, no nice eateries, nothing. And the same thing is going to happen here. So yeah, it's a ridiculous, short-sighted decision that doesn't even go a tenth of the way to solving the financial crisis they say we've got. So what's the point?
Because if it was the flip side, and and we hear this a lot with spending, especially from central government, and it's like, well, why don't you make this free for people? Why don't you change this tax? It's only a little bit of money. Surely you can afford it. And it's like, but why isn't this applied here? The Tourist Information Centre, like you say, is a beautiful church. It's a lovely little building. It's possibly not fit for purpose in its current state. I always thought that once Arras Square was done, we would have more historical information in there about the twinning of the town and things like that, because I think it must be quite depressing for people to come over from Arras and see the square as it is now. And this is like, by the way, this is what we're linked with.
Well, can I just say, well, did you partly agree with you, but if you go to Arras and see the little bit of, it's not called Ipswich Square, I can't remember what the square is called, but they've got a phone box in there from Ipswich, right? It's about what the size of Arras Square is. Well, it's about the 10th of the size of that. You could probably fit 4 postage stamps on it, and that's the square. So our square is probably slightly better than theirs, but they do make more of our twinning than we do here.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought this would be a really good opportunity for us to sort of like explain why we're twinned and all that, and use the Tourist Information Centre as more of that, like a kind of a mini museum, as well as giving out the information. When I moved to Ipswich, they used to do the ghost tours from there, and you'd go on a ghost tour.
They still do.
I don't know, they still do then, but you learnt so much about the history of Ipswich, and Ipswich is such a beautiful town, and we're missing that every year. The Lakeland Plastics Building and all this stuff of, the history, even just walking through it. And I don't think people fully appreciate that. But when you come into a town like Ipswich, where, like you say, the shops are in decline at the moment, there has to be more to offer, and we have that to offer. But because we've got a council that is so short-sighted and just doesn't feel like it has as much pride in the town as it should do. I love this town so much, Ian, you would not believe. And I would have 1,000,001 ideas for what we could do with that. Don't close it, sell it, and then just.
Well, we have had 1,000,001 ideas. One of the sad things is that Sarah Barber, who's the portfolio holder for the town centre, when she was challenged on this, kind of like her answer was, well, it's the internet's fault.
Yeah.
It's the rise of
It is
the internet that has done this. But what she really admitted is that her group has presided over something for the last 10 years, because that's how long they've been in power. And she mentioned things like TripAdvisor, which really has come about since they've been in power. They've let it stagnate. And it is, you use the words fit for purpose, it is no longer fit for purpose. It is exactly the same offering as it was when they came to power 10 years ago. We have an internal audit department at the council that looks at the way things are run. That picked holes in the Tourist Information Centre 2 years ago. We've been on at them since then to update, to modernise. They didn't even take contactless card payments, for Christ's sake, for a while. But we've been pushing them to modernise it. There is so much that it could be. There is so much that with a little bit of money that it could be. My decision now, or my tack now, is okay. If you're going to have to move it because you're saying it's expensive to have it in an old historic church, then let's make some money out of it. We've got a tired old market in Ipswich that keeps getting moved around because is nowhere suitable for it to be long term. Let's have a big indoor area. We've got so many empty buildings that the council own in the centre of Ipswich. We could almost create a big indoor market where we could have independent traders in there, as well as the existing market stalls, have the tourist information offering in there as well. And we could have like this brilliant place, but there's just no vision for Ipswich. There is nothing like that. It's just the same tired old stuff. And at a time when we're all in agreement that Ipswich is a wonderful place to come, but it's probably not that well known outside of Suffolk that it is such a brilliant place with lots of historic landmarks. I mean, I doubt there's many people outside Suffolk that know that it is England's oldest recorded town. There won't be people that know that. We've got buildings in the town centre from the 14th and 15th century. We've got a really historic dockland. We should be making more of it, and this isn't the time to do it. I'm not one of these people that will argue against any cut. I'm very pragmatic with these things, and I admit that difficult decisions have to be made, and this isn't me opposing a cut because I'll oppose any cuts, because that's not what I do. But cutting something that actually could be an income generating service, my opinion, anywhere that has a till in it, that you've got the ability, I'm a salesperson, anybody that has a till in it, that you've got ability to charge, you've got the ability to charge somebody for something, you should be making money. It shouldn't be losing money, you should be making money. Personally, at least one or two members of my extended family get a present from that place every year. It's on my list of shops I go around when I'm doing my Christmas shopping, because there's always something to get in there that's good for it, which you can send to somebody somewhere away. It should be making a profit. We shouldn't be looking at it and thinking, oh, we're going to cut that because it costs us. It should be making a profit, and we should be looking at the amount of money it generates by keeping people in Ipswich longer. A successful tourist information centre will keep people in the local economy longer. Now, I actually think we should have spoken to the other Suffolk districts as well, because undoubtedly Suffolk is a tourist goldmine. It's got places all over. But the one thing Suffolk isn't brilliant at is necessarily advertising itself. And I think that a lot of the Suffolk districts and councils together should be getting together and putting an offering together. And as Ipswich is the big county town that most people that visit here would have a visit to Ipswich, that's what it should be. But because Suffolk is a sea of blue Conservative councils with this little red dot of Ipswich in the middle, they just don't work together. And they've got no intention of working together. And the Labour Council won't even enter dialogue with them for most of the time.
And it's really sad to see, actually. And, you hear a lot of people, I think people who are from here sometimes take the town for granted. They don't necessarily see the beauty that is there. And I think when you have a council that runs this place down as much as the Labour Council does, it feeds into this idea that we've got nothing to offer. We don't show things off. And anything that we do, I can't think of any exceptions, any like events and things like that, always seem to be a roaring success. You've got the buy-in from the people who live here as well. If there's something on the waterfront, it is rammed. If we've got something in
Well,
the town
yeah,
centre, it is rammed. You've got people who want to make a success of the town, but the people that are in charge of the stuff, the council, seem to want to make it fail because they don't have that passion. They just don't. I've never heard.
I don't.
Sarah Barber, for example, she could have, when she read out that this is everything we've got to offer in Ipswich, she never once smiled. She never said, when we had this event, this is... Carol Jones has got passion. I'll give her that. But when you've got someone who's in charge of the town, who reads off this thing that has been given to her by someone else, she has no fire in her belly. She doesn't speak with love.
do you know what the issue is? And you get this a lot. It's stagnation. Look at the executive group for that. Labour have got some good councillors. Okay, and I'll be honest with you, because I could work with some of those people, but they've also got some people that have been councillors for years and years and years and years, and then some more years, and then add another few years on top of that. They're stagnant. Okay, they're stagnant. All the ideas that they had, they've done. You know, bear in mind they've been in power for the last 10 years. The Conservatives had an administration before that, not for many years, but then it was Labour before that as well. You know, so out of the last 50 years, they've run this council for most of that last 50 years. They've got no more ideas left. They've got no more ideas left, and that's why they have no ideas. That's why that building, that beautiful 16th century building at the waterfront that's just fallen into our hands, they're turning it into an office rather than a waterfront visitor centre. But let's move on a little bit, because you hit the nail on the head. You mentioned the wonderful festivals that Ipswich has, and it does. It puts on some terrific events. The council put on some absolutely terrific events. Music in the Park is, I believe, the biggest free music event in the country.
Now that
I've heard that before. I might be wrong, but if it's not the biggest, it's one of the biggest. But I've heard that statistic before. It's huge. It's huge. It attracts over 100,000 people. You know, it's massive. On a jewel in the crown, huge, big, beautiful park we've got sitting right in the centre of town with a 16th century manor house right in the middle of it. It's an amazing event. The Waterfront Festival that they have. I think the Waterfront Festival brought in something like 185,000 people last year over 2 days. Visited the Waterfront Festival. Now, this document, this budget document. Okay, so in the budget earlier this year, before coronavirus was a pandemic, the council said we were going to be spending £307,800 on events and festivals over the coming 12 months. Well, bear in mind, and this is one of their potential, this is what they're saying is one of their cost savings. And this is where I'm going to highlight to you that they are filling this document with figures that don't add up. So they said the events and festivals, there was going to be a net budget of £307,800. That's what the cost was going to be. They've cancelled nearly all of the festivals, obviously, including all of the big ones. So they might still be having a couple of small events at the Cornish, on the Cornhill and stuff, but all the big ones have been cancelled. The saving to the council, as stated in this document, £55,000. So I challenged that. I've challenged that. I've asked a question. Now I know how things work. I know. Now the problem is that, and they must think we're stupid. Each one of these festivals individually loses money. That's, if you put something on like this, it's going to lose money. You don't charge people entrance, so of course you're going to be losing money. But it's done as a let's get people into Ipswich, and all the money's spent in the shops and whatever. But the actual council itself loses money on putting on these events. So they're trying to say to me, oh yeah, well we're only making £55,000 because we're not selling the concession stalls and the other things that we make money on. So, well, yeah, I know, but you're also not having to pay all the extra in costs for the cleaning and everything else after it. They're making it out to be, you know, so where's the other £250,000 gone that they would have saved for not holding these festivals? It doesn't fit in with the narrative of their figures. So that's, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up in a way that kind of like, oh look, let's just talk about that figure there. I found something out shocking the other day. Shocking it was, and I only found this out because I'm sure some of the Labour councillors are thinking, how the hell did he know that? I tell you how I knew that, because a council officer had to send me an email, and I got an email from somebody, and in their kind of like email thing, it said temp. And I'm thinking, are they an agency worker doing an admin job? Let's to put it in a context here. Ipswich Borough Council have furloughed over 220 people. The equivalent, a lot of them part-time, but the equivalent of 86 full-time members of staff, of which they're paying, the government are paying 80%, they're paying 20%. So they're paying people to sit at home, a lot of which are in jobs like admin. They're paying an agency an inflated fee for an admin worker in their customer services department to do filing, sending emails. Now, I worked in agency work for 20 years.
What is your background here?
I know that the agency will probably be making a margin of about £2.50 an hour on this. So once you add on other costs, undoubtedly an agency worker is going to cost the council probably £3 or £4 more an hour than its own worker, and they're employing one. So I found out, and I knew that 100%. So I asked the question. So I pretended I didn't know, and I said, could you let me know if there's any agency staff employed? And it comes, yeah, there's loads more, not just this one, others as well. And it's like, well, hang on, how can you employ agency staff when you've got staff furloughed sitting at home doing nothing, and you're claiming you're in a financial black hole and you're going to go bust? But we're going to employ lots of agency staff.
And do you know how much that came to?
No, because there won't be a figure yet, because a lot of them are ongoing. But guess what? Strangely enough, as soon as I asked a question, I find out through one of my sources, weirdly enough, the agency staff that they've got working in the customer services department has been told their contract's not being extended past the 31st of July. So, well, hang on a minute. You don't even have to give agency staff any notice. So they've obviously admitted, shit, we've been found out, we're going to have to get rid of this person. But they haven't even got rid of them straight away. They're still employing them for another 2 or 3 weeks. It's like, well, hang on. They should have been got rid of the very first. So when they were looking at furloughing staff, they should have thought, right, agency, what can we do here? Tell you what, we won't pay this worker to sit at home and do nothing. We'll send home that worker that doesn't actually work for us and we're paying an agency for, and we'll keep this worker instead. Labour have got no idea how to not spend money.
And just to, I guess, clear things up, people haven't been furloughed necessarily because they have health conditions. It was a blanket furlough, wasn't it? So there are some people that are at home who want to work. And if they were given the option of, would you come back and do some admin or whatever, some would jump at the chance, because being furloughed and stuck at home is horrible for some people. So we're not saying, oh, those vulnerable people should be going back into the office and doing work. It's people who should have been given the opportunity, instead of being told to stay at home and be forgotten about, should have been given the opportunity to go back into that office, and we shouldn't have been just spending money for the sake of spending.
Correct. Correct. Well, to put it into context, another thing here, another item in the budget, they've spent an extra £223,000 on staff. But they've got 226 people sitting at home doing nothing, with the government's paying 80% of it. So how have they spent £223,000 extra on staff? I have got an answer. I mean, it's a rubbish answer about how this control centre's got to be. Basically, they don't know how to not spend. We had our very first what we call all councillor briefing, which was online, which was a private thing, not to the public. So it was probably in April, May time. I asked the leader of the council, I said, will you commit now to promising, to cancelling all non-essential spending at the borough? The answer, no, they won't. During this coronavirus pandemic that they're apparently going to lose £10.2 million on, they have wasted so much money on rubbish. Did you know they spent thousands of pounds getting new signage for their bin trucks to say, thank you, NHS?
Yep.
Now, admittedly, lovely, say thank you to the NHS. But if your council leader's going to go in the local press saying, cool, if the government don't give us more money, we're going to go bust. But you're spending £45,000 on stickering up vehicles that already had stickers on anyway, but you're going to put new stickers on them, which once this coronavirus thing is finished, you're going to have to take off and put new stickers back on them again, is absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy. They've got no idea how to stop spending money, which is why they've still got lots of agency staff working for them now. It's absolutely ridiculous that this situation persists.
Why are we, the general public, not being told about this in the media, who are supposed to be holding local government and central government to account?
It's undoubted that the local media is skewed towards Labour. Archant, who are the publishers here based in Norwich, are very left-wing in their views. Being in opposition is really difficult when you haven't got a local press that's prepared to hold them to account. I send information to the local press quite a lot. Very rarely does it get featured. And in fact, if anything, they'll write a positive pro piece about them. I don't get a right of reply, obviously, to David Ellesmere's column in the press. So it makes it very difficult. I would say the local radio station, the BBC station, they do hold them to account more than the press do. But as well, the harsh reality, Sam, of a lot of this is that, do you know what? Most members of the public aren't bothered.
But they're bothered about, we are being squeezed generally, and times have been tough for a lot of families for a number of years now. It matters when it comes to having to pay council tax. It matters that if they're spending all this money and they're wasting all this money, it matters because it's our money they're wasting.
Yeah. Look, one of my toughest jobs is getting this across to the public, because I think if the public were aware of all this, if I had the opportunity to sit down for 10 minutes with each member of the public and explain this to them, I think we'd get voted in power within 12 months. But that's the difficult thing. To put it into context, West Suffolk Council announced earlier this week that they believe that the coronavirus pandemic is going to have the net effect of them this year of £10 million. Exactly the same as Ipswich Borough Council. Now, West Suffolk Council, just to put it into context, is a council twice the size of Ipswich, as in number of population. There was two councils merged together, Forest Heath and Bury St Edmunds, to create West Suffolk Council. It's one of the biggest council areas in the country. But they're not going to make any cuts. They're going to wait and see what extra funding they get from the government, and they're going to make savings. We've announced exactly the same shortfall in our numbers, which, considering we only got half the population, is just ridiculous. But before knowing what money we're going to get for the government, we're going to say, "Oh, we've got to cut this, we've got to shut this. The government's making us go bust. Look how awful it is." To put it into context, when they published the budget, they included in it as a very late appendix a letter from the minister from the Communities Department, detailing down the next round of funding. Now, at the beginning of this crisis, government did make a statement, which is probably disingenuous of the government to have done this. I'll criticise the government for this. They did say they were going to compensate councils for all spending.
Yeah, they did.
Now, I think it's dawned on them that they can't do that. The person who made that statement showed a bit of political naivety there, because councils will spend stupid money on stupid things, and they shouldn't, the government shouldn't pay for those stickers that have gone on side of Ipswich Borough Council's buses, because that was a stupid decision. But the government should pay for the fact that they've instructed the council to house every homeless person in temporary accommodation, which will end up costing us probably £750,000. And they will pay for that. Now, obviously, that money comes in tranches. They're not going to give the money to the council up front. So, we got another £264,000 this week, and we get it in tranches. But really importantly, the government announced in this letter something called a co-payment scheme. So all the money that the council is going to lose through not having its car parks open, not having its leisure centres open and that kind of thing, and theatres open, the government has basically set out this scheme and said, you're going to have to cover the first 5% of losses. We're going to cover the next 75% of losses. Now, in this document, it says that we are going to lose £5.8 million in fees and income and charges.
Yeah.
Okay. Neither the chief executive, neither the leader of the council or the portfolio holder for finance, in their big long speeches at executive, even mentioned this scheme, because they don't want to mention to you any money that might be coming in. All they want to tell you about is money that might be going out.
Yeah.
So some back of the fag packet maths says that if all of our income was eligible for this fund, we would get £4.2 million from the government. And that we won't get that much because not all of it will be eligible, but we'll get a sizable chunk. And none of that is mentioned in this budget. And that would actually balance this and some and actually give us a bit of a surplus. So, but of course, that's what my argument is. Until this scheme was only announced 2 weeks ago, so the detail's not around yet. So don't ask councillors to vote on cuts to services when we've been promised money that we're just waiting to know exactly how much we're getting.
And then what happened? They voted for it.
Yeah, I didn't. I voted against. But that doesn't mean the cuts take place. See, this has to go to full council. So this will go to full council on the 29th of July, which will also be live streamed. We are planning on obviously opposing this. We are planning on asking lots and lots and lots of questions. And yes, but with the majority they've got, I'll be surprised if it doesn't get voted through.
I find it incredibly frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean the long and short of it is that this coronavirus has had a damaging effect on councils. Government has noticed that. Government is drip feeding the money into councils. Government has a difficult job because unfortunately there are some councils that are so badly run that if they gave all the money in advance for council, one council would waste it on something, and they can't do that.
Well, just to sort of explain something, like I used to, my background is insurance, and I used to work in marine insurance. And when insurance was first invented, it was for ship owners, but insurance companies or underwriters never covered 100% of the cost, because then there was no onus on the ship owner themselves. So there would be I think 15% or something that would be their responsibility. Yeah. It's the same principle here. If you were to cover 100% of something, it encourages reckless behaviour because they have no responsibility for anything that's lost. So this isn't something that would be an unusual thing. This percentage wouldn't be an unusual thing. It would be something that you would expect to see on a lot of things. So for anyone that's watching this that doesn't really or listening who was surprised that it wasn't 100%, it's to make sure that the person who is in charge of the finances still has a level of responsibility themselves.
But let's not forget as well, okay, and this is some of the difficulty around that. The council's already taken advantage of the government's furlough scheme. So costs in the departments that would lost income are already reduced because the staffing costs they're only paying 20% of as opposed to 80%. And just as a final thing, we've furloughed all this staff. I asked a question as to how they've put in the budget that they expect to get £250,000 from the government for this furlough scheme.
Yeah.
Well, I calculate the furlough at work. I do the payroll at work, so I calculate the furlough at work. I know how to calculate furlough. I know how to calculate costs. It doesn't only cover wages. For the last 3 months, it's covered pension costs and employers' national insurance. So I knew full well that figure was completely and utterly, and I'll say it now, bullshit. I don't care what councillor wants to call me up on it. It's a complete bullshit figure. They've brought out a report in July that's going to a council on the 29th of July, and they've estimated that the whole year income from furlough, so that's for months to come that haven't even been at less money. So I asked the question as to how much they've got already from furlough, because you have to apply for it monthly. So they've applied for May and they've applied for June, and they've got £250,000. So they've already had more than the money they say they're going to make in the whole year from this furlough scheme. They've ignored any money that they're going to make in July, in August, and September, and in October, which is when this furlough scheme's been running to. And we're talking of tens, if not hundreds of thousands. I worked out that I think the furlough scheme is going to be worth something approaching 600 to 700,000 pounds to Ipswich Borough Council, and in this budget it says 250,000 pounds, and that is a figure that I can prove, that I know I can prove, and I know highlights this document to be the complete load of rubbish that it actually is. I'm going to get in trouble for that as well.
Well, the thing is, we have an opportunity to watch full council that gives all of our councillors an opportunity to rip this apart, and I will be watching it, and I hope others do too, and I hope others realise, because I can't imagine it just being us as well. I can imagine Liberal Democrats are very good at Liberal Democrats in Ipswich are actually very good at looking at the fine detail. So I can imagine their questions would be quite interesting as well. And I'm hoping, even though they'll probably vote with it or abstain from voting, I'm hoping that it'll give an opportunity for you guys to rip apart for the rubbish that it is.
They certainly won't vote with it if it contains the tourist information closure. They are proper against the tourist information closure. They asked 4 questions alone on that at the executive on Tuesday. So they are definitely going to be against that. And you have to vote on it in a block. So yeah, I mean, to be fair, they usually vote in favour of the budgets. We usually abstain or vote against. They will, I think they'll vote against.
So the 29th is full council. You'll be able to watch it via YouTube. If you go into the Ipswich Borough Council website, I'll try and put a link actually on wherever I It'd be a good idea to put a link on about the executive as well, because people could watch back that. But it is quite interesting to see how, this is quite interesting for any politics student as well, because it's really interesting because you can download the actual budget document yourself to see a set of figures in black and white, and then you can listen to how the different sides spin exactly the same numbers. I've always said with statistics, I can make a statistic look good or look bad, and that's what a politician's job is. But it will show you that we're talking. It's bizarre, really, because we're talking about the same numbers, but in a different it's a totally different conversation. And that's kind of sums up politics. This is why a lot of people don't understand why I read the council papers, why I go to the meetings, and I'm not a councillor. And it's because I feel that I learn so much about politics in general by seeing the politicking that goes on. So you've got a document, and I can watch the way Ellesmere stands up and interprets that document, and the way you stand up and interpret that document, and the way the Lib Dems interpret in a completely different way to most people on the planet, quite frankly. But it is a really fascinating thing to see from someone who's a grassroots activist who would eventually like to progress through the political, atmosphere that is. It's an interesting to see how people do the politicking side of it. So yeah, for students or anyone who's interested in politics on a grassroots level, this is absolutely an opportunity. This is something coronavirus has given people, an opportunity to participate in a way that they've not been able to in the past, and that's by sitting in your home with the documents, watching it all unfold in front of you. Yeah, much better. Pop a link, 29th, watch full council and watch us smash the budget. Well, thank you for listening or watching, and we will catch up again soon. As ever, it's been a pleasure. Thank you. Bye. Bye.